A homeless Navy SEAL spent his final $11,000 on a rusted, abandoned cruise ship. Then, his loyal German shepherd uncovered a hidden archive tied to a forgotten fortune worth more than $75 million. Beneath the cold rain of an Oregon harbor, Caleb Mercer thought he was buying little more than a floating shelter. Broken by loss, haunted by war, and living with only his loyal German shepherd, Titan, he stepped aboard a ship everyone else had abandoned. But deep inside its rusted steel walls, Titan discovered a secret hidden for 40 years. That secret would expose powerful enemies, reveal a forgotten fortune, and change countless lives forever. Comment 1 if you'd have followed Titan into that ship, or 0 if you would have walked away. And tell us where you're watching from. Rain fell over Astoria Harbor the way it always seemed to in late November. Steady, cold, and relentless. The gray sky pressed low over the harbor, blending into the dark Pacific until sea and clouds became one endless sheet of steel. Fishing boats rocked against weathered docks. Rusted cranes stood frozen above shipping containers, like giant skeletons watching over the waterfront. Few people noticed the man walking along Pier 12. Those who did quickly looked away. Caleb Mercer had become part of the scenery. At 58 years old, the former Navy SEAL carried himself with the quiet discipline of a soldier. But time had left its mark. Deep lines crossed his face. His dark beard had turned mostly gray. Years of sleeping wherever he could find shelter had worn down both his body and spirit. His faded green jacket hung loosely from broad shoulders that had once carried heavy packs across deserts and mountains thousands of miles away. Beside him walked a German shepherd. The dog moved with calm confidence despite his age. His thick black and tan coat was touched with silver around the muzzle. His amber eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. Every few seconds he glanced toward Caleb, as if making sure his partner was still there. The dog's name was Titan. For 12 years they had been together. Titan had served beside Caleb during his final deployments overseas. They had survived explosions, ambushes, and long nights where neither man nor dog knew if they would see morning. Now they survived something different. Loneliness. Caleb reached the end of the pier and stopped. The harbor smelled of salt, diesel fuel, wet wood, and fish. Titan sat beside him. For a long moment, neither moved. The silence felt familiar, safe. Then Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. His last $23. He counted it twice. The bills were damp from the rain. Not enough for a motel. Not enough for much of anything. Just enough to get through another day. Maybe 2. Titan nudged his hand. Caleb smiled faintly. Don't worry, buddy. The dog tilted his head. I've been broke before. The words sounded hollow even to him, because the truth was worse. He wasn't just broke. He was tired. Tired in a way sleep could never fix. 5 years earlier, his wife Laura had died after a sudden illness. Everything afterward had happened fast. Medical bills, lost work, depression, the quiet collapse of a life that had once felt solid. By the time Caleb realized how far he had fallen, he had already lost the house, then the truck, then nearly everything else. Everything except Titan. The dog never left. Not once. A gull screamed overhead. Caleb folded the money and returned it to his pocket. Come on! Titan stood immediately. Together, they headed deeper into the industrial district, where warehouses lined the waterfront. Caleb spent most mornings looking for temporary work. Loading freight, repairing equipment, cleaning storage yards, anything that paid enough for food. Most days he found something. Some days he didn't. Today looked like one of the bad days. 3 different foremen had already turned him away. Too old. Not enough work. Try next week. The usual answers. By noon, rain soaked through his jacket. Titan remained close. As they passed a chain-link fence surrounding an abandoned shipyard, Caleb noticed a crowd gathered near a temporary office trailer. A banner flapped in the wind. Public auction vessels. Equipment. Salvage. He slowed. Titan immediately noticed. The dog followed his gaze toward the harbor. Beyond the fence sat dozens of forgotten vessels, fishing boats, cargo barges, tugboats, and one massive ship. Even through the rain, it dominated everything around it. Caleb stopped walking. The vessel towered above the harbor, like a ghost from another era. Its white paint had faded to dirty gray. Rust streaks ran down its hull like dried blood. Broken windows stared blankly toward the sea. The ship looked abandoned, forgotten, dead. Yet something about it pulled at him. Titan stared at it too. Neither moved. For a strange moment, man and dog seemed equally captivated. "What do you think?" Caleb asked quietly. Titan's ears lifted. The German shepherd gave a low sound deep in his throat. Not a growl, not a bark, just recognition. Caleb couldn't explain why, but he felt the same thing. A connection. He approached the fence. One of the auction workers noticed him. "You buying a ship?" The man laughed. Several others joined in. Caleb smiled politely. "Just looking." "That one?" Another worker asked, pointing toward the giant vessel. "The Northern Star." Caleb looked at the ship again. The name was barely visible beneath layers of rust. The Northern Star. It sounded familiar, almost comforting. "What happened to her?" Caleb asked. The worker shrugged. "Cruise line went bankrupt years ago. Nobody wanted it. Maintenance costs are insane. Too expensive to restore." The man grinned. "Too ugly to save." More laughter. Caleb ignored it. His eyes remained fixed on the ship. Something stirred inside him. Not excitement. Not exactly. More like understanding. The Northern Star looked the way he felt. Forgotten. Broken. Abandoned. By everyone who once cared. The worker pulled a clipboard from under his arm. "She's being auctioned this afternoon. Probably sold for scrap. Honestly, whoever buys her is an idiot." The crowd laughed again. Caleb looked down. Titan sat perfectly still, watching the ship. Then the dog did something unusual. He stood and pressed against the fence. Not aggressively, almost curiously. His eyes never left the Northern Star. Caleb frowned. Titan rarely reacted to objects. People, animals, danger. Yes, but not ships. Yet here he was. Focused, alert, interested. Caleb felt a chill, unrelated to the rain. The auction began 30 minutes later. Most bidders focused on machinery and smaller vessels. Nobody paid attention to the cruise ship. Whenever the auctioneer mentioned it, people chuckled. The Northern Star had become a local joke, a floating disaster, a money pit, an impossible project. The bidding opened at $10,000. Silence. Nobody raised a hand. The auctioneer tried again. Nothing. A minute passed. The crowd shifted awkwardly. Then Caleb looked into his pocket. His fingers touched a small envelope. The last of the insurance money he had never spent. The emergency reserve he had protected for years. $11,000. Everything. Every remaining dollar. His entire future. Titan sat beside him. The dog looked up. Their eyes met. For a second, Caleb remembered. Another day. Another decision. Years earlier, A frightened military working dog nobody wanted after a difficult deployment. Everyone had advised against adopting him. Too expensive. Too much responsibility. Too much risk. Caleb had ignored them. It became the best decision of his life. The auctioneer sighed. $10,000. Any bids? Silence. Rain hammered against the metal roof. Far away, thunder rolled across the ocean. Then Caleb raised his hand. I'll bid. The crowd turned. Laughter erupted almost immediately. One dock worker nearly spilled his coffee. Another shook his head. You serious? Caleb ignored them. The auctioneer blinked. $11,000? Caleb nodded. The auctioneer looked around. No one responded. No one challenged the bid. Because nobody wanted the ship. Not at any price. A minute later, the gavel struck. Sold. The sound echoed across the harbor. Just like that. The Northern Star belonged to Caleb Mercer. The homeless veteran. The man with almost nothing. The crowd dispersed quickly. Most people were still laughing. One worker approached as Caleb signed paperwork. You know you're crazy, right? Caleb folded the documents. Probably. The man pointed toward the ship. That thing's dying. Caleb looked at the vessel. Rain slid down rusted steel. Broken windows reflected the gray sky. The Northern Star seemed lonely. Just like him. Maybe that's why he couldn't walk away. Maybe, Caleb said softly. But everybody deserves one more chance. The worker stared, then shook his head and left. An hour later, Caleb stood alone on the dock. The crowd was gone. The rain had eased. Only Titan remained beside him. Together, they faced the enormous ship. For the first time in years, Caleb felt something unfamiliar. Not happiness, not yet, but possibility. The Northern Star might be broken. It might be worthless. It might destroy the last thing he owned. Yet, for reasons he couldn't explain, the ship felt like the beginning of something. Titan suddenly stepped forward. The dog stared at the towering vessel, then slowly wagged his tail. Once. Twice. A rare gesture. From the disciplined old canine. Caleb laughed softly. You like it too, huh? Titan's eyes remained fixed on the ship. The wind carried the scent of salt water across the harbor. Dark waves crashed against distant rocks. Above them, clouds began to part. Only slightly. Just enough for a single beam of sunlight to break through. The light touched the rusted hull of the Northern Star. For one brief moment, the dying ship almost looked alive. Neither Caleb nor Titan knew it yet. But hidden deep inside that forgotten vessel was a secret powerful enough to change both their lives forever. And somewhere behind layers of steel, rust, and silence, the Northern Star was waiting. Waiting for the only two souls willing to listen. A homeless veteran and the dog who refused to leave his side. As twilight settled over Astoria, Caleb Mercer stood at the edge of the dock and stared up at the Northern Star. The ship seemed even larger now that it belonged to him. Dark clouds drifted across the fading sky. Harbor lights reflected off rain-soaked steel. The vessel's rusted hull stretched across the water like a sleeping giant that had not moved in years. Most people saw decay. Caleb saw shelter. Maybe for the first time in a very long while. Titan stood beside him, his ears forward, studying the ship with the same focus he once reserved for dangerous missions. Well, partner, Caleb said quietly, let's see what $11,000 bought us. The old gangway creaked beneath their weight as they climbed aboard. Every step echoed. The sound carried through the empty vessel like distant footsteps. Caleb paused near the entrance. The silence felt strange. Not peaceful, Not threatening, just heavy, as though the ship were holding its breath. The main lobby opened before them. Years earlier, it must have been beautiful. A grand staircase curved toward upper decks. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, covered in dust and cobwebs. Water stains streaked the walls. Broken furniture lay scattered across faded carpets. Nature had begun reclaiming everything. Rain dripped steadily through a cracked skylight. Plink, 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 plink. The sound echoed through the massive room. Titan moved first. His paws made almost no noise as he crossed the lobby. He sniffed carefully. Alert. Professional. The habits of a military working dog never truly disappeared. Caleb smiled. Clear the room for me. Huh? Titan glanced back briefly, then continued his inspection. For a moment, Caleb felt transported years into the past. A mission briefing, a dangerous structure, a trusted partner leading the way. The memory brought both comfort and pain. He pushed it aside, one room at a time, one day at a time. That was how survival worked now. They spent the next 2 hours exploring. Most sections of the ship were in terrible condition. Flooded hallways, collapsed ceilings, electrical systems long dead. Yet some areas remained surprisingly intact. Near the center of the vessel, Caleb discovered several crew cabins that appeared structurally sound. Small, simple, dry. That was enough. By midnight, he had chosen one as their temporary home. The room contained an old bunk bolted to the wall and a small desk covered in dust. Nothing else. To Caleb, it felt luxurious. He spread his blanket across the mattress. Titan immediately circled twice before settling near the door. Always near the door. Always watching. The same way he had done overseas. The same way he had done in shelters, alleyways, and abandoned buildings for years, protecting his partner, even while sleeping. The wind howled outside. Rain struck the ship's steel skin. Somewhere deep below, metal groaned. The northern star seemed alive. Caleb lay staring at the ceiling. For a while, he listened to the sounds. The ship settling, the waves below, the breathing of his dog. Gradually, his eyes closed. Sleep came, and with it, the dreams. The desert returned first. It always did. Heat, dust, the smell of smoke, voices over a radio, a convoy moving through unfamiliar terrain. Then came the explosion, the flash, the chaos, the screams. Caleb saw faces he had spent years trying to forget. Friends, brothers, men who never came home. The dream shifted. Now he was searching, running, calling names, unable to find them, unable to save them. The familiar weight crushed his chest. His breathing quickened. The panic arrived, just like every other night. Then suddenly, a cold nose touched his hand. Caleb jerked awake. The darkness of the cabin replaced the nightmare. His heart pounded. Sweat covered his face. Titan stood beside the bunk, watching him, waiting. The dog had done this hundreds of times. Sometimes before the nightmare became severe. Sometimes immediately afterward. Always knowing. Always there. Caleb sat up slowly. Titan pressed against him. Solid, real, present. The panic began fading. Thanks, buddy. Titan rested his head against Caleb's knee. Outside, the storm continued. Inside, the nightmare lost its grip. Eventually, Caleb drifted back to sleep. This time, without dreams. Morning arrived. Beneath a curtain of gray clouds, fog rolled across the harbor. Fishing boats emerged and disappeared like ghosts. Caleb stepped onto the deck, holding a steaming cup of coffee he had brewed over a portable camping stove. Titan stood beside him. The cold air carried the scent of salt and rain. For several minutes, they simply watched the ocean. It felt strangely peaceful. Then hunger reminded Caleb that peace did not pay bills. They needed supplies, food, fuel, tools, everything. Owning a ship and surviving aboard it were two very different things. By midday, Caleb found temporary work unloading fishing equipment for a local warehouse. The pay was small, but it was enough. Titan waited nearby, earning smiles from workers who otherwise ignored Caleb. Dogs had a way of opening doors people kept closed. That afternoon, Caleb stopped at a small diner near the waterfront. The harbor lantern. A bell chimed as he entered. Warm air greeted him, along with the smell of coffee and fresh soup. Several customers glanced up. Most quickly looked away. Caleb was used to that. He chose a booth near the window. Titan lay beside him. A waitress approached, carrying a coffee pot. She appeared to be in her early 40s. Brown hair tied back, kind eyes, the sort of face that suggested she had seen her share of hardship. "You own that shepherd?" she asked. Caleb nodded. "His name's Titan." The woman smiled. "Beautiful dog." She filled his coffee cup. Unlike many people, she didn't seem uncomfortable around him. She didn't stare at his worn clothes, didn't judge, didn't rush away. "My name's Emily," she said. "Caleb, you're the guy who bought the cruise ship." The entire diner seemed to pause. Caleb chuckled. News travels fast. Emily laughed softly. "Astoria isn't very big." She leaned closer. "For what it's worth, I think it's brave." Caleb looked surprised. Most people think it's stupid. Most people never try anything. The answer caught him off guard. Before he could respond, another customer called her name. She smiled and returned to work. But something lingered. A small act of kindness. Nothing more. Yet it felt significant because kindness had become rare. Over the next several days, a routine emerged. Morning work, afternoon repairs, evenings aboard the Northern Star. Caleb cleaned debris, cleared hallways, patched leaks, made slow progress. The ship remained enormous, impossible even, yet every repaired section felt like a victory. Titan accompanied him everywhere. The dog explored endlessly, deck after deck, corridor after corridor. Always curious. Always alert. One evening, as the sun disappeared behind distant clouds, Caleb stood on the upper observation deck. The harbor lights flickered below. Fog drifted across the water. The ship creaked softly around him. Titan sat nearby, watching, guarding. The familiar weight of loneliness settled over Caleb's shoulders. But it felt different now. Less crushing. Less permanent. The Northern Star wasn't just shelter anymore. It was becoming home, a broken home, a forgotten home, but home nonetheless. As darkness spread across the harbor, Caleb looked toward the endless Pacific. For the first time in years, he found himself wondering about tomorrow, not fearing it, wondering. The thought felt unfamiliar, almost dangerous. Hope often did. Far below deck, hidden behind layers of rust and silence, something waited. Something neither Caleb nor Titan understood yet. And, somewhere deep within the sleeping ship, a secret remained untouched. Watching, waiting, patient, as though the Northern Star had been expecting them all along. The fog arrived before sunrise. It drifted into Astoria from the Pacific, swallowing docks, warehouses, and fishing boats until the harbor looked like a forgotten world, floating between sea and sky. Caleb Mercer stood on the upper deck of the Northern Star, with a steaming mug of coffee warming his hands. Below him, waves slapped gently against the ship's hull. The old vessel groaned occasionally, settling beneath changing tides. Titan stood nearby, watching, listening. The German shepherd's ears twitched constantly. Caleb smiled. "You know something I don't?" Titan glanced at him, then returned his attention toward the lower decks. Caleb didn't think much of it. At least not yet. Over the next week, progress continued slowly, steadily. Each morning, Caleb worked temporary jobs around town. Each afternoon, he returned to the ship carrying tools, supplies, or salvaged materials. By evening, he was usually exhausted, but something had changed. For the first time in years, exhaustion felt earned, meaningful. The Northern Star was beginning to feel less abandoned. One repaired cabin became 2. A cleaned hallway became 3. Several sections now had portable lights powered by small batteries Caleb managed to acquire. The ship remained enormous, yet every improvement mattered. Every repaired corner felt like reclaiming a piece of something forgotten. The townspeople still thought he was crazy. That much hadn't changed, but a few had begun waving when he passed. Some even asked questions. Most were curious. None understood. Not completely. Only Titan seemed to understand why Caleb kept going. The dog never complained, never questioned, never doubted. Every morning, he followed Caleb through the ship like a silent guardian until one afternoon. That was when things began to change. Caleb had spent most of the day repairing a damaged stairwell near the center of the vessel. The work took longer than expected. By sunset, he was covered in rust, dust, and sweat. Titan had disappeared several hours earlier. That wasn't unusual. The dog often explored while Caleb worked. Usually he remained nearby. Usually. As Caleb packed away his tools, he heard barking. Not playful barking, not excitement. Something different, urgent, sharp, focused. Caleb immediately froze. Years of military training had conditioned him to recognize changes in Titan's behavior. The dog never barked without reason. Never. The sound came again, deep below deck. Caleb grabbed his flashlight. Titan. Another bark echoed through the vessel. He moved quickly, down stairwells, through dark corridors, past rows of abandoned cabins. The sound guided him deeper into the ship than he had explored before. Eventually, he reached an old maintenance section near the lower levels. The air felt colder there, damp, heavy. The hallway narrowed. Rust covered nearly every surface. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. Plink, plink, plink. Then Caleb saw him. Titan stood at the end of the corridor. Rigid, focused. His gaze fixed on a steel wall. The dog wasn't barking now. Instead, he scratched furiously against the metal. Claws scraping steel. Again, and again, and again. Caleb frowned. "What are you doing?" Titan didn't look away. The scratching continued. The sound echoed through the corridor. Caleb approached. The wall appeared ordinary. Just another rusted bulkhead separating sections of the ship. Nothing unusual. Nothing obvious. Yet, Titan remained obsessed. The German shepherd whined softly, then scratched harder. Caleb examined the area. Rust, dust, old paint, nothing else. No rats. He muttered. Titan immediately barked, as if disagreeing. Caleb chuckled. Okay. Not rats. The dog scratched again, then pressed his nose against the steel, listening, waiting. Caleb had seen that behavior before. Years earlier. During deployments. Titan sometimes detected hidden compartments, concealed doors, or people long before humans noticed anything unusual. The memory made Caleb pause. Still, this was a ship, an abandoned ship, not a combat zone. Eventually, darkness forced them to leave. Titan resisted. The dog repeatedly looked back toward the wall, reluctantly, as though abandoning something important. That night, Caleb couldn't stop thinking about it. The behavior wasn't normal. Titan wasn't chasing scents, wasn't hunting animals. Something else had captured his attention. Something behind that wall. The following morning, Caleb returned to work. Titan stayed aboard. When Caleb came back that evening, he immediately knew something was wrong. The moment he stepped onto the ship, he heard scratching. Faint, distant, persistent. His stomach tightened. He followed the sound. Down the same stairwells. Down the same corridors. Toward the same maintenance section. There was Titan. Exactly where he had left him. Still focused on the wall. Still scratching. Hours later, the floor beneath him was covered in rust flakes. The dog's paws looked dirty, raw. Caleb's expression hardened. Enough. Titan stopped, but only briefly. The moment Caleb stepped away, the scratching resumed. The behavior continued. For 3 more days. Every morning. Every afternoon. Every night. Titan always returned. No matter what. Caleb tried distracting him. Food, walks, training exercises. Nothing worked. The dog remained obsessed. On the 4th day, Emily Foster visited the ship. She carried a paper bag filled with sandwiches. Thought you might forget lunch again. Caleb laughed. You're making me look irresponsible. You are irresponsible. She smiled. Luckily, your dog isn't. Titan greeted her politely, then immediately headed below deck. Emily watched him disappear. Where's he going? Caleb sighed. That's the mystery. Over lunch, he explained everything. The wall, the scratching, the strange behavior. Emily listened carefully. When he finished, she shrugged. Maybe he hears something. Like what? I don't know, sir. She looked around the ship. Maybe something is trapped, after all these years. Stranger things have happened. Caleb considered that. Maybe. But deep down, he sensed something different, something he couldn't explain. That evening, they investigated together. Emily carried a flashlight. Caleb carried tools. Titan led the way. The German Shepherd moved quickly through the corridors. Confident, certain, as if following an invisible path. When they reached the maintenance section, Titan immediately began scratching again. Emily stared. You weren't exaggerating. No. Titan scratched harder. The sound echoed through the narrow hallway. Emily approached the wall. She tapped it gently, then frowned. That sounds strange. Caleb moved closer. She tapped again. This time he heard it too. The sound wasn't solid. Not entirely. There was a slight difference. A faint, hollow echo. Barely noticeable. But there. Emily looked at him. Did you hear that? Caleb nodded slowly. For the first time, uncertainty crept into his expression. Titan barked once, sharp, victorious, as though he knew they were finally paying attention. The next morning, Caleb returned with measuring tools and old ship diagrams he had purchased from the Harbor Records office. For hours, he studied them, compared measurements, checked layouts. Something didn't add up. The maintenance corridor dimensions seemed wrong by nearly 8 feet. According to the blueprints, there should have been another compartment beyond the wall. A compartment that no longer existed. or at least appeared not to exist. Caleb stared at the drawings, then at the wall, then back at the drawings. His pulse quickened. The discrepancy made no sense. Structures this size weren't designed with missing rooms. Not accidentally. Titan sat nearby, watching quietly, waiting. The dog seemed calmer now, as if he knew they were getting closer. Caleb ran his hand across the cold steel. Rust flaked away beneath his fingers. The wall felt old, very old. And suddenly, something caught his eye. Near the floor, partially hidden beneath decades of corrosion. A seam, thin, almost invisible, but definitely there. Not a structural joint. Not part of the original design. Something added later. Something concealed. Caleb's heart began beating faster, slowly. He stood. The corridor suddenly felt smaller. The silence, heavier. Behind him, Titan rose to his feet. The German shepherd's ears stood fully upright. His eyes never left the wall. Neither did Caleb's. Because for the first time since buying the Northern Star, he was no longer looking at a rusted piece of steel. He was looking at a secret, one hidden so carefully that it had remained untouched for decades. And somehow, against all odds, Titan had found it. The dog stepped forward, pressed his nose against the seam, then looked back at Caleb, waiting, almost smiling, as if saying the same thing he had been trying to say all week. Look closer. Something is here. The words weren't spoken. They didn't need to be. As Caleb Mercer stared at the thin seam hidden beneath layers of rust, he felt the same sensation he had experienced years earlier during military operations. The feeling that something important sat just beyond reach, something hidden, something waiting. The narrow maintenance corridor seemed unusually quiet. Even the constant groaning of the Northern Star felt distant. Titan stood beside the wall, still, focused, certain. The German shepherd's amber eyes never left the rusted steel. Emily Foster watched from several feet away, her flashlight beam trembling slightly. You think it's a door? She asked. Caleb knelt beside the seam. I don't know. His fingers traced the metal. The gap extended farther than he initially realized. Nearly 7 feet vertically. Too straight to be accidental. Too deliberate to ignore. Titan let out a low whine. Not impatient. Encouraging. Caleb nodded. Okay. Partner. He stood. We find out. The following morning arrived beneath clear skies. For the first time in days, sunlight broke through the clouds over Astoria. The harbor shimmered beneath golden light. Fishing boats moved across calm water. Seagulls circled overhead, yet Caleb barely noticed any of it. His attention remained fixed on the hidden compartment. By noon, he had gathered tools, a portable welding torch, metal cutters, safety goggles, work lights. Titan followed him down to the maintenance corridor. Emily arrived shortly afterward carrying coffee and sandwiches. You really think we're opening it today? Caleb smiled. We've come this far. The corridor soon filled with the sound of grinding metal. Sparks showered across the floor. The smell of heated steel spread through the air. Titan remained several feet back, watching carefully. Hour after hour, Caleb worked. The wall proved thicker than expected. Whoever had sealed it wanted it hidden permanently. By late afternoon, sweat covered Caleb's face despite the cool air. His shoulders ached. His hands were sore. Then finally, a section of steel shifted. A loud metallic crack echoed through the corridor. Everyone froze. The sound seemed impossibly loud. Titan immediately stood, ears forward, alert. The loosened panel moved slightly, only an inch, but enough. Caleb carefully set down his tools. For a moment, Nobody spoke. The atmosphere felt heavy, almost sacred, as though they stood on the threshold of something forgotten. Emily broke the silence first. "You should do the honors." Caleb nodded slowly. Together they pulled. The panel resisted, then suddenly moved. Dust exploded into the corridor. Air rushed outward. Cold, dry, ancient. Titan stepped forward immediately. His nose worked furiously, sniffing, examining, searching. Caleb lifted a flashlight. The beam disappeared into darkness. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Caleb stepped through the opening. The room beyond wasn't large, perhaps 20 feet wide, 30 feet long, but it immediately became clear that it didn't belong to the rest of the ship. Everything was different, cleaner, more organized, protected. The walls were lined with metal shelving. The air felt remarkably dry. No water damage, no mold, no corrosion. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to preserve this space. Emily entered behind him. Oh my God. Dust covered every surface, but beneath the dust lay order. Rows of cabinets, storage boxes, locked drawers, file shelves. It looked less like a hidden compartment and more like a forgotten office or archive. Titan moved deeper inside. His nails clicked softly against the floor. The dog appeared satisfied, as though he had finally led them to the destination he had sensed all along. Caleb slowly swept his flashlight across the room. Photographs, maps, ledgers, documents, boxes, stacked neatly against walls. The discovery was fascinating, but not shocking. At least not yet. Then the flashlight beam stopped. Near the far wall stood a large steel cabinet, unlike anything else in the room. Its construction immediately caught Caleb's attention. Heavy, fireproof, industrial. The type used to protect valuable records. The cabinet door remained closed, locked. Emily noticed it too. "What do you think's inside?" Caleb didn't answer immediately. Instead, he approached carefully. Something about the cabinet felt important, almost intentional, as though everything else in the room existed merely to protect whatever sat inside. Titan walked directly toward it, then sat looking up, waiting. Caleb laughed softly. Of course. The dog seemed pleased. The lock took nearly 30 minutes to open. Years of corrosion had fused parts together. Eventually, the mechanism gave way with a loud click. Silence followed. Nobody moved. Then Caleb slowly opened the door. Inside were several shelves. Most contained folders, documents, boxes. Nothing dramatic, nothing glamorous. No gold, no jewels, no treasure of the kind most people imagined. Then he saw it. Resting alone on the lowest shelf was a fireproof metal cylinder, roughly 3 feet long. End of comm. Then he saw it. It was sealed, protected, and unlike everything else in the cabinet, the object looked oddly important. Emily noticed it immediately. What's that? Caleb carefully lifted it. Heavy, far heavier than expected. The cylinder felt dense, substantial. Its exterior carried faded markings. Most had become unreadable, except one. Property records. Caleb frowned. Property records? That was unexpected. Very unexpected. Together, they carried the container to a nearby table. The seal required considerable effort to remove. When it finally opened, several rolled documents slid into view. Dozens, maybe hundreds, carefully preserved, protected from time, protected from moisture, protected from destruction. Caleb unrolled the first one. A deed, the second. Another deed. The third. Ownership papers. Contracts. Property transfers. Legal documents. Emily looked confused. That's it? Caleb wasn't sure. At first glance, the papers seemed ordinary, old, interesting, but hardly life-changing. Then something caught his attention. A name. He stared at it. Read it again, then again. The name felt familiar. Very familiar. He unrolled another document. Then another. More names. More companies. More records. Several belonged to shipping corporations he recognized. From his years traveling through ports around the world, corporations that no longer existed, or so he thought. His pulse quickened. Emily. She looked up. What? Look at this. He handed her one document, then another. Her eyes widened. Neither spoke. The room suddenly felt different. Larger. More significant. As though they had stumbled onto something neither fully understood. Hours passed. Sunlight faded. Darkness settled outside. Yet Caleb remained seated at the table. Reading. Studying. Examining. The deeper he looked, the stranger everything became. Some documents dated back 40 years, others went back even further. Many referenced properties scattered across multiple states, shipping terminals, warehouses, coastal land, business holdings, entire portfolios, and all of them appeared connected. Titan lay nearby, resting peacefully. Mission accomplished for now. Near midnight, Caleb finally leaned back, exhausted, confused, overwhelmed. Emily rubbed her temples. This doesn't make any sense. No, Caleb agreed. It doesn't. He stared at the documents spread across the table. The room remained silent. Only the distant sound of waves echoed through the ship. Somewhere inside those papers lay a story. A very important story. He could feel it, but he couldn't see the full picture yet. Not alone. Not without help. Titan suddenly lifted his head. The dog watched Caleb carefully, the same way he always did. When waiting for a decision, Caleb smiled faintly. Looks like we need an expert. Emily nodded. Know anyone? Caleb looked down at one particular document. The name of a Seattle maritime law firm appeared near the bottom. A name connected to several of the records. A name that might finally provide answers. For the first time since opening the hidden room, excitement began replacing confusion. Because whatever these documents represented, they were clearly important. Important enough for someone to hide. Important enough for someone to protect. Important enough for a dog like Titan to spend days trying to find. And as Caleb carefully rolled the documents back into their protective container, he had no idea that the papers resting before him were worth far more than money. They were the first pieces of a secret that would soon attract attention from people who desperately wished it had remained buried forever. The rain returned before dawn. Soft at first, then steady. The northern star sat motionless against the dock as gray clouds swallowed the Oregon coastline once again. Inside the hidden archive room, Caleb Mercer had barely slept. Stacks of documents covered the steel table. Property records, corporate transfers, shipping contracts, ownership agreements. Most people would have seen nothing but paperwork. Caleb saw a puzzle, and puzzles had a way of keeping him awake. Titan lay nearby. The German shepherd slept with his head resting on his paws, though one ear remained alert. Even at rest, the old canine never fully relaxed. Years of service had wired both of them that way. Caleb rubbed his eyes and looked at the business card resting beside the documents. Rachel Donovan, maritime attorney, Seattle, Washington. The name appeared repeatedly throughout the archive. Not Rachel herself, but her law firm's predecessor. Dozens of legal filings carried the same corporate seal. If anyone could make sense of the documents, It would be someone like her. By 8:00 that morning, Caleb made the call. He expected rejection or indifference. Instead, a calm professional voice answered, "Donovan Maritime Legal Group." Caleb glanced at Titan, then spoke. "My name is Caleb Mercer. I think I found something aboard an abandoned ship." The woman on the other end sounded polite but cautious. "What kind of something?" "Old legal records." A pause. "What kind of records?" Caleb looked at the stacks. "Property deeds." Another pause. Longer this time. Then came the question that changed everything. "What ship?" "The Northern Star." Silence. Complete silence. For nearly 5 seconds. When the woman finally spoke again, her tone had changed. "Could you repeat the vessel's name?" "The Northern Star." More silence. Then, "I think we should meet." 3 days later, a black SUV rolled into Astoria beneath a cold afternoon sky. Caleb watched from the upper deck. Titan stood beside him. The vehicle parked near the dock. A woman stepped out carrying a leather briefcase. Mid-40s, professional, confident, sharp blue eyes. Everything about Rachel Donovan suggested competence. She paused briefly to study the Northern Star. Even from a distance, Caleb noticed something unusual. She wasn't looking at the ship like an attorney. She was looking at it like someone seeing a ghost. Rachel climbed aboard. Titan approached first. As always, the German Shepherd stopped a few feet away and studied her carefully. Rachel smiled. "Well," she crouched, slowly. "You must be Titan." The dog sniffed her hand, then stepped aside. "Permission granted." Caleb laughed. "That's his version of a background check." Rachel stood. "Then I guess I passed." For the next hour, Caleb led her through the ship. Past restored hallways. Past repaired cabins. Past sections. Still waiting for attention. Eventually, they reached the hidden archive room. The moment Rachel stepped inside, her expression changed. The attorney stopped walking, slowly turning, examining every shelf, every cabinet, every document box, every preserved file. Caleb saw disbelief spreading across her face. "What is it?" he asked. Rachel didn't answer immediately. Instead, she approached one shelf, pulled out a folder, opened it. Her eyes widened. Then another, and another. Finally, she looked up. "Do you have any idea what you found?" Caleb exchanged a glance with Emily, who had joined them that morning. "Not really." Rachel exhaled slowly, then sat down. For the next 6 hours, she worked without stopping. The archive transformed into a legal battlefield. Documents covered every available surface. Maps, contracts, ownership ledgers, shipping manifests, corporate records. Rachel examined them all. The deeper she dug, the quieter she became, until finally evening arrived. Outside, darkness settled across the harbor. Inside, only work lamps illuminated the room. Rachel removed her glasses, massaged her temples, then stared directly at Caleb. "You're going to need to sit down." Neither Caleb nor Emily spoke. Rachel opened one of the deeds, then another, then several more. She arranged them side by side. "The companies listed here officially collapsed 40 years ago." Caleb nodded. "That's what I thought." Rachel shook her head. "No, you don't understand." She pointed toward the documents. "These companies didn't simply disappear. They own massive assets, shipping terminals, warehouse districts, commercial waterfront property, storage facilities, foreign holdings, entire business networks." Emily looked stunned. Rachel continued. "When the corporations collapsed, everyone assumed ownership records were lost, destroyed, missing." She paused, then tapped the archive. But they weren't. Caleb felt his stomach tighten. Rachel opened another folder. These documents establish ownership chains, legal rights, property claims, everything. The room suddenly felt very small. Caleb stared at the papers, trying to absorb what he was hearing. Rachel finally delivered the number. If these records authenticate, if everything here proves legitimate. She looked around the archive. The value exceeds $75 million. Silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The number seemed impossible. Emily blinked. 75 million? Rachel nodded. At minimum. Caleb actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it sounded ridiculous. Absurd. Impossible. He looked around the room again. The shelves, the folders, the dusty documents, nothing about them looked valuable. Yet according to Rachel, they represented a fortune. Titan stood and approached Caleb. The dog rested his head against his owner's leg, grounding him, bringing him back to reality. Rachel smiled slightly. He found all this? Caleb scratched behind Titan's ears. He did. Rachel looked at the German Shepherd. Then, he's probably the smartest dog in Oregon. For the first time all day, Caleb smiled. But Rachel wasn't finished. Her expression darkened. There is one problem. The smile disappeared. What problem? Emily asked. Rachel tapped the documents. If these records are real, they should never have been left behind. Caleb frowned. What does that mean? It means somebody knew they existed. The room fell silent again. Rachel continued. Fortunes don't disappear accidentally. Neither do ownership records. She opened another folder. Inside were references to properties across multiple states: Washington, Oregon, California, Alaska. Some still active, some redeveloped, some now worth millions. Rachel looked directly at Caleb. These papers have been hidden for decades. The question isn't whether someone hid them. The question is who wanted them hidden. The words lingered in the air, heavy, uncomfortable. Titan suddenly lifted his head. His ears stood upright. The dog stared toward the corridor outside the archive room. For a moment, nobody noticed. Then Caleb did. The former SEAL's instincts immediately activated. What is it, buddy? Titan remained still, listening. The dog wasn't alarmed. Not exactly. But something had captured his attention. After several seconds, the tension faded. Titan relaxed. The moment passed, yet Caleb felt uneasy. Rachel carefully gathered several documents. I need to verify everything. That will take time. Days, possibly weeks. Caleb nodded. Take whatever you need. Rachel looked at him. No. She closed the folders. Nothing leaves this ship. Caleb blinked. Why? Rachel glanced around the room, then lowered her voice. Because if I'm right. She paused. For the first time since arriving, genuine concern appeared in her eyes. Someone may already be looking for these. Outside, rain hammered the steel hull. The Northern Star groaned softly beneath the weather. Deep within the hidden archive, surrounded by documents worth more than Caleb could imagine, a new realization settled over everyone present. The discovery wasn't over. It had only just begun. And somewhere beyond the harbor lights of Astoria, forces neither Caleb nor Rachel could yet see were beginning to stir. Because secrets worth $75 million rarely stay hidden forever. For several days, life aboard the Northern Star settled into an uneasy routine. On the surface, nothing seemed different. Caleb continued repairing sections of the ship. Titan followed him faithfully from deck to deck. Emily visited whenever her shifts at the harbor lantern allowed. Rachel remained busy authenticating documents and contacting legal archives across the West Coast. Yet beneath the routine, tensions slowly began to grow like pressure building before a storm. The first sign came on a Tuesday morning. Caleb was replacing rusted railing sections along the upper promenade deck when Titan suddenly stopped walking beside him. The dog lifted his head, his ears locked forward, and his body became perfectly still. Caleb immediately noticed. Years of experience had taught him to trust Titan's instincts. He followed the dog's gaze. Across the harbor sat a black SUV parked near an abandoned warehouse. Nothing unusual, except it had been there yesterday, and the day before that. The vehicle never approached, never moved closer. It simply remained parked. Watching, Titan let out a low rumble. Not a growl, a warning. Caleb studied the vehicle for another moment before returning to work. But the uneasy feeling stayed with him. That evening, Emily arrived carrying takeout containers. She found Caleb sitting on the bow watching the sunset. The Pacific stretched endlessly beyond the harbor entrance. Orange light reflected across dark water. For a moment, everything looked peaceful. Then Emily noticed the expression on his face. "You okay?" Caleb nodded slowly. "Maybe. That's not convincing." He smiled faintly. "There's a vehicle that's been sitting near the docks." Emily glanced toward shore. The black SUV. Caleb looked surprised. "You've seen it?" She nodded. "Everyone has. Nobody knows who it belongs to." That didn't help, not at all. The following morning brought another surprise. A local hobbyist with a drone appeared near the waterfront. At first, Caleb ignored him. People flew drones around the waterfront all the time, but this one seemed unusually interested in the Northern Star. The drone circled repeatedly, photographing the vessel, recording video, hovering over multiple decks. Titan barked furiously from below. The drone quickly retreated. Later that afternoon, Emily showed Caleb something on her phone. A local social media page. Aerial photos of the Northern Star filled the screen. The headline read, "Homeless Veterans Mystery Ship Discovery." Thousands of views. Hundreds of comments. Questions. Speculation. Rumors. Most of it was harmless, but not all. Caleb felt his stomach tighten. "What did you tell people?" Emily looked offended. "Nothing. I haven't said a word." He immediately regretted the question. "Sorry." She softened. "I know." Rachel was far less calm when she saw the post. The attorney arrived that evening, carrying a stack of legal folders. The moment she stepped aboard, she looked frustrated. "This is bad." Caleb frowned. "It's just a photo, no?" Rachel handed him her phone. More articles, more rumors, more discussions. The story was spreading fast. People had begun connecting the Northern Star to old shipping companies, mentioned in public records. Some comments even referenced hidden assets. Not accurately, but close enough. Rachel crossed her arms. Attention attracts curiosity. Curiosity attracts problems. Caleb looked toward the dark harbor. He didn't like the sound of that. 2 days later, the first real problem arrived. His name was Victor Harlan. The man appeared shortly after noon. A sleek black sedan pulled up near the dock. The driver stepped out first. Then Victor emerged. Tall, well-dressed, expensive coat, silver hair, the confident posture of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. Titan immediately disliked him. The German shepherd positioned himself between Victor and Caleb before the man reached the gangway. Victor smiled, though it never reached his eyes. "Mr. Mercer." Caleb nodded. "Can I help you?" Victor glanced toward the ship, a remarkable vessel. It's seen better days. Still valuable. The conversation felt strange from the beginning. Too polished. Too rehearsed. Victor studied the Northern Star for several seconds, then finally turned back. "I'd like to purchase it." Caleb blinked. "The ship?" "Immediately." Caleb laughed. "I'm not selling." Victor's smile never changed. "Perhaps I should clarify." He opened a leather folder. Inside sat a contract. "I am prepared to offer $3 million. Silence. Even Emily, who happened to be nearby, stared in disbelief. $3 million? For a rusting cruise ship purchased weeks earlier for $11,000? The offer made no sense. Victor continued. "No negotiations, no delays. Funds available immediately." Caleb didn't even look at the paperwork. Instead, he studied the man. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. "Why?" Victor tilted his head. "Why?" "What? Why do you want it?" The businessman smiled again. "The Northern Star has historical value." Caleb almost laughed. Historical value? That wasn't the answer. They both knew it. Titan stepped forward. A low growl emerged from deep within the dog's chest. Victor glanced down briefly. The smile disappeared. Only for a moment. But Caleb noticed. "Not interested," Caleb said. Victor closed the folder. The atmosphere changed instantly. Polite friendliness vanished. Something colder appeared underneath. "If you change your mind," Victor said, handing Caleb a business card, "call me." Then he left. The black sedan disappeared down the waterfront road. Titan continued staring after it, long after the vehicle vanished. That night, rain pounded the harbor. Wind rattled windows throughout the ship. Most of Astoria slept. Not Caleb. Something about Victor Harlan bothered him. The offer, the timing, the pressure. Nothing felt right. Around 2:00 the morning, Titan suddenly exploded from his sleeping position. The German shepherd leaped to his feet, every muscle rigid, every sense alert. A sharp bark shattered the silence. Caleb sat upright instantly. His heart accelerated. Titan barked again, then sprinted toward the corridor. The old instincts returned immediately. Caleb grabbed a flashlight. Titan. Titan. The dog was already moving, down stairwells, through dark hallways, toward the lower decks. Caleb followed. The ship seemed eerily quiet. Then he heard it. A metallic sound. Faint. Somewhere below. Clang. Silence. Then another. Clang. Not ship noise. Not settling steel. Something else. Someone else. Titan reached the lower maintenance corridor first. The dog stopped, growling. The sound echoed through the darkness. Caleb switched off his flashlight and listened. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then a shadow moved, far down the corridor, barely visible. A figure, human. The figure froze, realized it had been discovered, then turned and ran. Footsteps echoed through the ship. Titan lunged forward. Caleb grabbed his collar. "Stay." The command came automatically. Titan obeyed instantly. The footsteps disappeared. A distant door slammed. Then silence returned. Complete silence. Caleb moved cautiously through the corridor, searching, examining. Eventually, he found the source. A maintenance hatch. Recently opened. Fresh tool marks surrounded the lock. Someone had forced entry. Not successfully, but they had tried. The realization settled heavily over him. This wasn't random. Someone had boarded the Northern Star. Someone had been searching. Titan sniffed the hatch, then looked back toward Caleb. The message was clear. The danger wasn't coming. It was already here. As dawn slowly approached and gray light crept across the harbor, Caleb stood beside the hidden archive room. The documents remained untouched. Safe. For now. But deep down, he knew something had changed. The discovery was no secret. People were watching. People were asking questions. And somewhere out there, someone wanted what was hidden inside the Northern Star badly enough to risk coming aboard in the middle of the night. The shadows gathering around the ship were growing darker, and neither Caleb nor Titan had yet seen the worst of them. The rain finally stopped 3 days later. Cold sunlight broke through the clouds and spilled across Astoria, turning puddles into mirrors and making the Northern Star glow faintly against the harbor. From a distance, the ship almost looked alive. But Caleb Mercer wasn't admiring the view. He was installing security cameras. 3 of them. Used equipment, purchased from a salvage yard. Nothing fancy, just enough to watch the gangway, the lower maintenance corridor, and the hidden archive room. Titan followed him from one location to another. The German Shepherd seemed unusually alert. Ever since the attempted intrusion, the dog rarely relaxed. His ears constantly moved. End of 40 and 9. End ein. End of re. His eyes tracked every sound, every shadow, every unfamiliar face. Caleb trusted that instinct. Because Titan had never been wrong before. By mid-afternoon, Rachel Donovan arrived carrying another stack of files. She climbed aboard quickly, faster than usual. The expression on her face immediately caught Caleb's attention. "Bad news?" he asked. Rachel glanced around before answering. "I've confirmed the deeds." Caleb felt his stomach tighten. "And?" She looked directly at him. "They're authentic." For a moment, nobody spoke. The words hung in the air. Real. The documents were real. The ownership claims. The assets. The forgotten holdings. Everything. Emily happened to be visiting when Rachel delivered the news. She sat down slowly. $75 million. Rachel shook her head. Possibly more. Even now, the number sounded impossible. Caleb looked toward the ocean. He had spent years wondering where his next meal would come from. Years sleeping in shelters, trucks, abandoned buildings, and borrowed rooms. Now people were telling him he possessed documents connected to tens of millions of dollars. The idea felt unreal, almost uncomfortable. Rachel lowered her voice. "That's not the part that worries me." Caleb immediately looked back. "What does?" Rachel pulled out another folder. Thicker, older, more worn than the others. "I found something strange." The 3 of them moved into the archive room. Titan followed. As always, the hidden space felt different now. Less like a discovery, more like the center of a growing storm. Rachel spread several records across the table. "These don't fit." Caleb studied them. "What do you mean?" "The deeds make sense. The ownership records make sense." She tapped several pages. "But these don't belong with property documents." Emily leaned closer. "What are they?" Rachel exhaled. "Internal correspondence, private records, confidential reports." Caleb frowned. The papers appeared ordinary enough. Letters, memos, corporate communications. Then Rachel pointed toward a highlighted paragraph. The room became very quiet. End v. Disses. V. Disses. The document referenced missing assets, hidden transfers, false accounting entries. Several names appeared repeatedly. Powerful names. Family names still recognized across parts of the Pacific Northwest. Business empires. Shipping magnates. Political donors. People whose descendants remained influential. Rachel spoke carefully. "These aren't just property records. They're evidence." Caleb's pulse quickened. "Evidence of what?" Rachel looked at him. "Fraud." The word landed heavily. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Titan shifted slightly beneath the table. The dog seemed to sense the tension. Rachel continued. Decades ago, someone manipulated asset transfers during the collapse of these companies. She pointed to multiple records. Money vanished. Properties disappeared. Ownership structures changed. Entire holdings were moved into shell corporations. Caleb stared at the papers, trying to absorb it all. Why hide the records? Rachel gave a humorless smile. Because records create accountability, and accountability creates problems. The hidden archive suddenly felt much more dangerous. Not because of money, because of truth. The realization settled heavily over everyone. The deeds represented value, but these files represented consequences. Emily folded her arms. So somebody buried all this? Rachel nodded. Looks that way. And somebody else preserved it. Titan suddenly stood. The movement startled everyone. The German Shepherd walked toward the far side of the archive room, toward an old rusted filing cabinet. He stopped, sniffed, then pawed once against the floor. Caleb smiled faintly. Here we go again. Rachel looked confused. What? Titan found this room. The dog pawed again, more insistently. Then again, the same behavior he had shown before discovering the archive. Caleb slowly approached. The cabinet appeared ordinary, old, heavy, covered in dust. Nothing unusual, except Titan refused to leave it alone. The dog scratched again, harder. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Does he always do that? Only when he's trying to tell me something. Titan barked once, sharp, focused. Caleb crouched. His fingers brushed across the floor. The metal surface felt uneven, very slightly. Almost impossible to notice. Almost. He looked closer, then froze. Another seam, hidden beneath years of grime, smaller than the first. Much smaller. His heartbeat accelerated. Emily noticed immediately. You found something. Caleb nodded slowly. I think Titan did. The cabinet took nearly an hour to move. It weighed hundreds of pounds. Once it finally shifted, the hidden outline became visible. A square panel built directly into the floor. Rachel stared. You've got to be kidding me. Titan's tail wagged once. Only once, but it was enough. The old K9 looked proud of himself. Caleb grabbed tools. The others watched. The panel proved easier to open than the wall had been. Within minutes, the lock released. The metal hatch lifted. A hidden compartment waited beneath. Dark, dry, untouched. Inside sat a single waterproof case. Nothing else. No gold, no valuables, no treasure. Just one case. Caleb carefully removed it. The container felt surprisingly heavy. The atmosphere inside the archive room changed instantly. Everyone sensed it. Whatever sat inside mattered. The case opened with a click. Silence followed. Then, Rachel looked inside. Her face drained of color. Emily noticed immediately. What? Rachel didn't answer. She simply handed over the top document. Caleb read the first page, then the second, then the third. A cold feeling spread through his chest. These weren't business records. They were investigations, witness statements, private ledgers, personal correspondence, evidence connecting multiple powerful individuals to the fraud Rachel had described. Names, dates, transactions, details. Enough information to destroy reputations. Enough information to trigger lawsuits. Enough information to expose entire families. Rachel sat down slowly. Oh my God. Nobody corrected her. Because everyone felt exactly the same. The deed suddenly seemed secondary, almost irrelevant compared with what the evidence could reveal. The real value of the archive wasn't $75 million. It was the truth. And truth could be far more dangerous than money. Titan rested beside Caleb's chair. The German shepherd looked content as if he had completed another mission. Yet Caleb couldn't shake the growing unease inside him. Whoever hid these records had gone to extraordinary lengths. Whoever wanted them hidden would likely do the same. Rachel finally broke the silence. Now I understand. Caleb looked up. Understand what? She glanced toward the documents, then toward the ship, then toward the harbor beyond. Why someone boarded the Northern Star? The room became very still. Nobody argued. Nobody questioned it. Because for the first time the answer felt obvious. The intruder hadn't come searching for money. The intruder had come searching for this. The evidence they feared. Outside evening. Shadows stretched across the harbor. A cargo ship sounded its horn in the distance. The sound echoed across the water. Deep, lonely, foreboding, and somewhere beyond Astoria, beyond the ocean fog and quiet docks, someone was beginning to realize that the hidden records aboard the Northern Star might still exist. The moment that realization spread, everything would change. Because powerful people could ignore a lost fortune. But they rarely ignored evidence, and Caleb Mercer was now standing directly in the path of a secret that had survived 40 years buried beneath steel and silence. A secret that some people would do almost anything to keep buried. The weather forecast arrived on a Thursday morning. A major Pacific storm was moving toward the Oregon coast. Harbor workers talked about it while securing equipment. Fishing boats returned early. Store owners boarded windows. The sky darkened long before sunset. By evening, Astoria looked as though the entire town was holding its breath. Caleb stood on the upper deck of the Northern Star and watched black clouds gather over the ocean. The wind carried the scent of rain and salt. Titan sat beside him. The German shepherd's fur rippled in the strengthening gusts. Neither man nor dog seemed comfortable. Rachel had spent most of the day organizing copies of the archive. Several records had already been secured with trusted legal contacts, but the most important documents remained aboard the ship. The original files, the evidence, the hidden truth. Emily joined them just before dusk. Emily had already checked on everyone she loved and returned before the roads became dangerous. "You should come into town," she said. "The storm's supposed to be bad." Caleb shook his head. "I can't leave the ship." Emily looked toward the darkening horizon. "Then at least be careful." Rachel crossed her arms. "I agree." Caleb smiled faintly. "I've survived worse." Emily studied the black horizon, then made a quiet decision to remain aboard. She helped secure loose equipment, stocked the first aid supplies, and refused to let Caleb face the storm alone. The words slipped out automatically. The moment he said them, memories surfaced. Deserts, mountains, long nights overseas, storms of a different kind. Titan nudged his hand, grounding him, bringing him back. Emily noticed. She always seemed to notice. The first drops of rain struck the deck. Large, cold, heavy. Within minutes, the storm arrived. Wind screamed across the harbor. Rain hammered the ship's steel hull. Thunder rolled over the Pacific like distant artillery. The Northern Star groaned beneath the assault, yet somehow remained standing, like Caleb, broken, weathered, still standing. Around 9:00 that night, power failed throughout much of the harbor district. Darkness swallowed the waterfront. Only emergency lights remained. Inside the Northern Star, battery-powered lanterns cast long shadows through corridors and stairwells. The atmosphere felt strange, unsettling. The ship seemed alive. Every creak sounded louder. Every movement felt amplified. Titan paced restlessly, back and forth, back and forth. His behavior reminded Caleb of missions years earlier. The dog sensed something. He just didn't know what. By 11:00, the storm had intensified. Rain struck sideways. Waves crashed against the harbor walls. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Caleb sat inside the archive room reviewing security footage. Titan lay nearby. Rachel occupied a table covered in legal files. Neither spoke much. The storm filled every silence. Then Titan stood so abruptly that his claws scraped the deck. His ears snapped forward. His entire body became rigid. The reaction was so sudden that Caleb rose before thinking. "What is it?" Titan growled. Low, deep, danger. The old military K9 had used that exact warning countless times before. Caleb's pulse accelerated. He moved toward the monitor screens. One camera showed the gangway, empty. Another showed the lower deck corridor, empty. On the third screen, Caleb froze. A shadow moved across the screen. Someone was aboard. The image vanished, then returned. Movement. Fast, deliberate. Rachel immediately stood. "What is that?" Caleb didn't answer. Because he already knew. The people searching for the archive had finally arrived. Titan barked sharply. The sound echoed through the room. The dog sprinted toward the hallway. Caleb followed. Years disappeared. Training returned. Instinct returned. Focus returned. The frightened homeless veteran vanished. The Navy SEAL emerged. The storm masked most sounds, but not all. Footsteps, distant, moving somewhere on the lower decks. Titan led the way. The German Shepherd moved through the darkness with remarkable confidence, turning corners, choosing paths, tracking. The ship became a maze of shadows and echoing corridors. Rain rattled windows, wind howled through damaged sections. Every sound blended together. Then suddenly Titan stopped. The dog stood motionless, listening ahead. Somewhere beyond the next corridor. Movement. A metallic clang echoed, then another. Someone was trying to reach the archive. Caleb's jaw tightened. The realization brought unexpected emotion. Anger. Not because of the money. Not because of the ship. Because the archive represented something larger now. Truth. History. The sacrifices of people long forgotten. Someone had protected those records for decades. Caleb wasn't about to let that effort die. Titan surged forward. The dog rounded the corner. A loud shout followed, then confusion, then scrambling footsteps. The intruders hadn't expected resistance, especially not from a highly trained German Shepherd. Caleb reached the intersection seconds later. Several dark figures retreated through the corridor. The storm and darkness made details impossible to see. But one fact became obvious. They knew exactly where they were going. This wasn't random. This wasn't theft. This was a search operation. Titan barked furiously. The figures disappeared deeper into the ship. The chase continued through stairwells, through abandoned passenger decks, through forgotten hallways covered in dust. The Northern Star became a battlefield of shadows. Thunder shook the vessel. Lightning flashed through broken windows. For brief moments, entire corridors illuminated white. Then darkness returned. Again and again, Titan remained several steps ahead, focused, determined. The old K9 moved like a dog, half his age. Years of training guiding every action. Then, everything changed. A crash echoed from below. Metal striking metal followed immediately by a sharp yelp. The sound froze Caleb where he stood. Titan. No response. Only another painful cry. Fear exploded through him. The kind of fear that bypassed logic. The kind that strikes the heart before the mind can react. He sprinted down a stairwell, across a maintenance platform, into a storage section near the center of the ship. There he found Titan beside a collapsed shelving unit. A jagged strip of torn metal had sliced across the dog's shoulder. Titan was still alert, still ready, but something was wrong. Very wrong. A deep cut marked his shoulder. Blood stained his fur. Rainwater dripping through the damaged ceiling mixed with crimson on the steel floor. Titan remained standing. Yet, barely. The sight hit Caleb harder than anything else that night. Harder than the intruders, harder than the storm, harder than the threat. Because Titan wasn't just a dog. He was family. End of lesson. 6's Doc. End of lesson. The last constant in a life filled with loss. The German Shepherd took a shaky step toward him. Still trying to work, still trying to protect. Even injured. Caleb dropped beside him. His hands moved automatically. Years of combat medical training taking over. Pressure. Assessment. Control. Titan leaned against him, trusting completely. The dog never whimpered again, not once. Outside lightning illuminated the harbor. Inside the storm reached its peak. The intruders were gone, driven away by the chaos. Or perhaps by Titan himself. Nobody knew. Nobody cared. Because in that moment, only one thing mattered. Keeping Titan alive. Caleb gently rested a hand against the dog's neck. You stay with me. Titan's breathing remained steady, but weaker than before. Rachel arrived moments later. The sex ender dawn. 7. Re-ev. Dot. Caleb gently rested a hand against the dog's neck. Her face went pale when she saw the blood. Oh no. Caleb looked up. For the first time since the attack began, fear showed openly in his eyes. Not fear for himself, fear for his partner. The storm raged outside. The northern star groaned beneath the wind. And as thunder rolled across the Oregon coast, Caleb Mercer realized the battle for the archive had become personal. Titan had protected him once again, just as he had done overseas, just as he had done through years of homelessness, just as he had done every single day since entering Caleb's life. Now, the old German Shepherd lay wounded because of it, and as Caleb pressed his hand against the injury and listened to the storm hammer the ship around them, only one question mattered anymore. Would Titan survive the night? Thunder rolled across the Oregon coast. The sound vibrated through the steel bones of the northern star. Rain crashed against broken windows. Wind screamed through empty corridors. The entire ship seemed to shudder beneath the storm. Yet Caleb Mercer barely noticed any of it. His world had narrowed to a single point. Titan. The German Shepherd lay on the deck beside him. His breathing remained steady, but shallow. Blood stained the fur along his shoulder. The injury was serious, not immediately fatal, but serious enough to terrify Caleb, because Titan wasn't young anymore. The dog had survived years of military service, years of hardship, years of homelessness. But age changed everything. Recovery became harder. Healing took longer. And for the first time in many years, Caleb felt completely helpless. Rachel knelt nearby, holding a flashlight. Her face looked pale in the flickering light. Can you stop the bleeding? Caleb nodded. I think so. His hands moved with practiced precision. Pressure, bandaging, assessment, procedures learned years earlier, under far worse circumstances. Yet this felt different. Back then, training had created distance. Now there was none. This wasn't a soldier. This wasn't a stranger. This was Titan. Every touch carried emotion. Every second carried fear. The dog opened his eyes briefly. Now, there was none. Amber eyes, tired but trusting. still focused on Caleb. Always Caleb. The sight nearly broke him. "Stay with me, buddy." Titan's tail moved weakly. Just once, but it was enough. The old warrior was still fighting. Hours passed. The storm intensified. Roads flooded throughout Astoria. Emergency services struggled to respond to weather-related calls. The harbor became inaccessible. Even if Caleb wanted veterinary assistance, none could reach them. They were alone, completely alone. Around midnight, Emily rushed in from the upper decks, where she had been securing emergency supplies. Her raincoat was soaked, her hair clung to her face, and water dripped from every part of her clothing. She froze the moment she saw Titan. "Oh, no." Her voice cracked. Caleb looked exhausted, more exhausted than she had ever seen him. "How is he?" Caleb glanced down. "Still here." Emily immediately knelt beside them. No questions, no hesitation. She simply helped, holding lights, fetching supplies, bringing clean towels, offering comfort where she could. The hours became a blur. Storm, thunder, rain, bandages, silence, worry. At some point after 1:00 the morning, Titan drifted into unconsciousness. The moment terrified Caleb. His hands trembled. His breathing quickened. Old fears surfaced. The same fears he had spent years suppressing. Loss, failure, survivor's guilt. The room suddenly felt smaller. The storm louder. His chest tightened. Hoodie. End of section. Emily noticed immediately. Caleb. He didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on Titan. The dog wasn't moving, wasn't responding, only breathing. Slowly, weakly, Caleb lowered his head, and something inside him finally cracked. For years he had carried everything alone. Laura's death, the collapse of his life, the memories from combat, the friends who never came home, the guilt, the loneliness, the endless feeling that somehow he had failed people who deserved better. Now all of it surfaced at once. Emily quietly sat beside him. Rachel remained respectfully silent. Neither interrupted, neither judged. For several minutes, Caleb simply stared at the floor, listening to the storm, listening to Titan breathe. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "There were 6 of us. Neither woman moved. In the convoy." The words came slowly, painfully, like opening an old wound. "We were supposed to all come home. Thunder shook the ship. Caleb swallowed hard. But we didn't." The room remained silent. The memories seemed to pull him backward through time. Desert roads, military vehicles, dust, fear, loss. Titan was there. His eyes drifted toward the unconscious dog. He found danger before any of us. He saved lives. A faint smile appeared, then disappeared. But not all of them. The guilt in his voice was unmistakable. Emily finally spoke. "That wasn't your fault." Caleb laughed softly. The sound carried no humor. "Maybe." Another long silence followed. Then, he looked toward Titan. Again. "I couldn't save everybody." The admission felt enormous. Years overdue. The storm continued outside. But inside the room something changed. For the first time, Caleb wasn't fighting the memories. He wasn't burying them. He wasn't running. He was simply speaking, and somehow that mattered. Emily gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "You saved who you could." Caleb closed his eyes. Titan shifted slightly. A small movement, tiny, but unmistakable. Everyone noticed. Rachel leaned forward. "I think he heard you." The comment drew the first genuine smile Caleb had shown all night. By 3:00 the morning, the storm began weakening. Rain still fell, but less violently. The worst had passed. Titan remained unconscious. Yet, his breathing had stabilized. The bleeding had stopped. Hope returned. Carefully, cautiously, like sunrise appearing on a distant horizon. Near dawn, Caleb sat alone beside the dog. Rachel slept in a nearby chair. Emily rested against the wall, exhausted. The ship was quiet now. Only occasional creaks interrupted the silence. Outside, gray light slowly emerged across the harbor. The longest night was ending. Caleb reached down and rested his hand against Titan's neck. The fur felt warm, steady, alive. A memory surfaced unexpectedly. Years earlier, a military kennel. A difficult German shepherd nobody wanted to handle. Too stubborn, too intense, too independent. Everyone had warned Caleb about him. He adopted Titan. Anyway, best decision he ever made. A faint sound interrupted the memory. Caleb looked down. Titan's eyes were open. Only slightly, but open. The old dog blinked slowly, then looked directly at him. Relief crashed through Caleb so hard, it nearly stole his breath. A laugh escaped. Then, another. The kind that comes only after overwhelming fear. Welcome back. Titan's tail moved weakly. Twice. Emily woke immediately. Rachel followed seconds later. All three stared at the dog. None of them spoke, because words weren't necessary. The moment said everything. Titan wasn't out of danger. Not yet. Recovery would take time, but he had survived the night. The realization settled over the room like sunlight. Warm, quiet, powerful. Outside, dawn spread across Astoria Harbor. Storm clouds drifted toward the horizon. The ocean calmed. The harbor slowly returned to life. And for the first time, in many hours, Caleb allowed himself to breathe. The immediate danger had passed. Titan was alive. Yet even as relief settled over the Northern Star, another truth remained. The people searching for the archive were still out there. The storm had delayed them, nothing more. And hidden somewhere among the documents, Titan had helped uncover, lay answers that neither Caleb nor Rachel fully understood. Answers powerful enough to bring strangers aboard during a hurricane. Answers powerful enough to make someone willing to risk everything. The longest night was over. But the truth hidden inside the Northern Star was only beginning to reveal itself. 3 days after the storm, sunlight returned to Astoria. The harbor looked washed clean. Rainwater still dripped from rooftops and dock pilings. Fishing boats moved slowly through calm water. Seagulls circled overhead. Life continued. Yet aboard the Northern Star, everything felt different. The ship had become quieter, more reflective, as though it too were recovering from the storm. Titan spent most of his time resting. As soon as the roads reopened, a harbor veterinarian had cleaned and stitched the wound, but the injury had left him weak. A temporary bed had been arranged inside one of the restored crew cabins. Soft blankets covered the floor. Bowls of water sat nearby. Emily visited daily. Rachel checked on him whenever she arrived. But Titan's eyes always searched for one person first. Caleb. The moment he entered the room, the old German shepherd relaxed. The same trust, the same loyalty, the same bond that had survived more than a decade. Caleb found himself spending hours beside the dog, not because Titan needed him, because he needed Titan. The storm had forced him to confront emotions he had avoided for years. The guilt, the grief, the memories. Something inside him had shifted that night. Not completely, but enough. enough to begin healing. Outside the cabin window, sunlight reflected across the harbor. For the first time in years, Caleb could remember Laura without immediately feeling pain. The memory surprised him. He sat quietly beside Titan, watching waves, listening to gulls, breathing. Simple things, forgotten things, human things. A knock interrupted the moment. Rachel stood in the doorway, holding a worn leather folder. Her expression looked different. Not worried, not frightened, thoughtful. "We found something." Caleb immediately stood. Another discovery. Another secret. The pattern was becoming familiar. 20 minutes later, they gathered inside the archive room. Emily had arrived earlier with coffee. Titan remained in his cabin recovering. For the first time since the hidden room was discovered, the German Shepherd was absent. The empty space felt strange, almost wrong. Rachel placed the leather folder on the table. End of track. Who F6, end of chapter. This was buried beneath several storage ledgers. Carefully, she opened it. Inside rested a sealed envelope, yellowed with age, protected inside waxed paper. The handwriting remained remarkably clear. One line appeared across the front. "To the guardian who finds this." Silence settled over the room. Even Emily stopped moving. Caleb stared at the envelope. The words felt oddly personal, as though they had been written directly to him. Rachel carefully removed the contents. Several pages unfolded. Handwritten, elegant, precise. The signature appeared immediately recognizable. Captain William Ashford, the final captain of the Northern Star. The same name referenced repeatedly throughout the archive. The man responsible for protecting everything hidden aboard the vessel. Rachel looked at Caleb. "You should read it." His hands felt unexpectedly heavy as he accepted the pages. For a moment he simply stared, then began reading aloud. The room became perfectly silent. "If you are reading this letter, then history has finally caught up with the Northern Star." The words felt alive. The voice of a man speaking across decades. "Many will believe what you have found is wealth. Many will believe these documents exist because someone sought profit. They are mistaken." Caleb continued reading. End of quote. The captain described the final years of the shipping companies, the corruption, the disappearing assets, the manipulation of records, powerful individuals protecting themselves, while others suffered as legal battles intensified. Evidence began vanishing. Documents disappeared. Witnesses withdrew. Truth slowly eroded until Captain Ashford made a decision. He would preserve everything. Not for himself, not for money, for history, for accountability, for future generations. The room remained silent, except for Caleb's voice. Outside, waves tapped gently against the hull. The Northern Star seemed to listen. Then Caleb reached the final pages, the section that changed everything. There may come a day when someone discovers this archive. That person will likely not be wealthy. They will likely not be powerful. They will likely understand loss. Caleb stopped reading. The words hit harder than expected. Rachel exchanged a glance with Emily. Neither interrupted. Slowly, Caleb continued. Because only someone who has lost something truly understands the importance of preserving what remains. A long silence followed. His throat tightened. The captain's words felt less like a letter and more like a mirror. Forgotten, discarded, overlooked, yet still valuable. Just like the Northern Star, just like the documents, just like Caleb himself. The final paragraph waited. He forced himself to continue. If you have found this archive, then perhaps you are the guardian I hoped for. Protect the truth. Protect the stories. The value lies not in ownership. The value lies in remembrance. The letter ended there. Simple, direct, powerful. Nobody spoke for several moments. Even Rachel appeared emotional. Emily quietly wiped at one eye. The room felt transformed. The archive no longer seemed like a collection of records. It felt like a responsibility. Something larger than money. Something larger than any single person. Caleb carefully folded the letter. His hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, from recognition. For years, he had believed his life was over, that he had become a forgotten man, drifting through forgotten places. Yet somehow, he had arrived here. At this ship, at this archive, at this moment. The coincidence felt impossible. Rachel finally broke the silence. You realize what this means? Caleb nodded slowly. Maybe. No. She smiled gently. I don't think you do. She looked around the room. The captain wasn't hiding wealth. He was preserving truth. Emily leaned back, and somehow Titan found it. The mention of the dog brought a smile to everyone's face, because it was true. Without Titan, none of this happened. The hidden room remained hidden. The archive remained forgotten. The letter remained unread. End of quote. No. One read. Everything traced back to one stubborn German shepherd who refused to stop scratching at a wall. Rachel laughed softly. I think the captain underestimated one thing. What? Caleb asked. The guardian wasn't alone. The image appeared instantly. Titan, sitting before the hidden wall. Titan finding the floor compartment. Titan protecting the archive during the storm. Titan paying the price for it. The old K9 had been part of every discovery, every breakthrough, every step. For a moment, Caleb wished the dog could be in the room. Then Caleb noticed the scratch marks still visible on the steel, and realized Titan's presence was everywhere. In the open wall, in the hidden hatch, and in every document, now safe, on the table. As afternoon sunlight filtered through dusty windows, the atmosphere aboard the Northern Star changed once again. Fear gave way to purpose. Confusion gave way to understanding. The archive was no longer merely evidence, no longer merely wealth. It was a legacy. A message carried through 4 decades, waiting for someone willing to listen, waiting for someone willing to care, waiting for a guardian. And for the first time, since buying the abandoned ship, Caleb Mercer no longer wondered why he had been drawn to the Northern Star. Perhaps it wasn't luck. Perhaps it wasn't coincidence. Perhaps a forgotten ship and a forgotten veteran had simply found each other at exactly the right moment. Outside, the harbor glistened beneath afternoon sunlight. The storm was gone. The sky was clear. And somewhere ahead, beyond the remaining challenges and unanswered questions, a new future was beginning to take shape. A future neither Caleb nor Titan could have imagined when they first stepped aboard the ship nobody wanted. In the days that followed, Rachel delivered authenticated copies, the security footage, and Victor Harlan's business card to federal investigators. The black SUV and the intruders were traced to a private security company tied to Harlan. Warrants followed. The old fraud inquiry reopened, and the pressure around the Northern Star finally began to lift. Caleb did not celebrate anyone's downfall. He simply stood beside Titan and felt, for the first time, that the truth no longer depended on the two of them surviving alone. The transformation began quietly. There was no grand announcement, no television cameras, no ribbon cutting, just a handful of people showing up on a cold Saturday morning. Caleb stood on the upper deck of the Northern Star, holding a cup of coffee, as the first pickup truck rolled into the harbor parking lot. Then another, and another, and another. By 8:00, nearly 20 people had gathered near the gangway. Retired welders, former dock workers, local carpenters, fishermen, teachers, a few veterans, even several high school students looking for volunteer hours. Caleb stared down at them in disbelief. What are they doing here? Emily smiled beside him. They came to help. The news of the discovery had spread far beyond Astoria. Not the rumors, not the sensational headlines. The real story. A forgotten ship, a hidden archive, a veteran who refused to sell it, a dog who had uncovered the truth. People responded to that story, because deep down everyone wanted to believe forgotten things could still matter. Titan slowly walked onto the deck beside them. His shoulder had healed enough for short walks, though he moved more carefully now. The old German shepherd still carried himself with quiet dignity. The moment several volunteers saw him, smiles appeared immediately. That's Titan, the famous dog, the hero. Titan seemed unimpressed by the attention. He simply sat beside Caleb and watched, exactly as he always had. The work began that day and continued for weeks. The Northern Star slowly came back to life. Rust disappeared beneath fresh paint. Broken railings were replaced. Hallways were cleaned. Windows repaired. Lights restored. Every section of the ship improved, little by little. What surprised Caleb most wasn't the labor. It was the enthusiasm. People genuinely cared. One retired shipbuilder spent 3 weeks restoring part of the observation deck. A local artist volunteered to recreate old ship records. History teachers helped organize exhibits. The vessel that had once sat abandoned now attracted more visitors each week. Rachel Donovan worked just as hard. Legal battles filled her days. The archive had to be protected. The documents had to be preserved. Ownership claims required verification. Government agencies became involved. Historical organizations reached out. End of 5. Several museums offered assistance. The process was complicated, but Rachel never wavered. One afternoon, she arrived carrying a stack of papers, nearly 6 inches thick. Caleb laughed. Good news or bad news? Rachel dropped the stack onto a table. Good. Then why do you look exhausted? Because good news comes with paperwork. That answer made everyone laugh. The nonprofit foundation became official shortly afterward. The Northern Star Heritage Foundation. Its mission was simple: preserve history, educate future generations. Morley. End quote. Lee. Me. End quote. Mate. Me. Support veterans rebuilding their lives. The moment the paperwork cleared, donations began arriving. Some small, some surprisingly large, but all meaningful. For the first time since Laura's death, Caleb felt something he hadn't experienced in years: belonging. The feeling arrived gradually, during conversations, during workdays, during quiet moments, watching volunteers laugh together aboard the ship. He realized something important. The Northern Star wasn't only being restored, so was he. One evening, Emily found him sitting alone near the bow. The sun was setting. Orange light stretched across calm water. Titan rested beside him. The dog's head lay comfortably on his paws. You've been thinking. Emily sat down. Caleb smiled. That obvious? A little. He looked toward the horizon. I spent a long time believing I didn't have a place anymore. Emily didn't interrupt. She simply listened. The military ended. Laura died. I lost everything. The words came easier now, Not because the pain was gone, because it no longer controlled him. I thought my story was finished. Emily followed his gaze toward the ocean. But it wasn't. No. A faint smile appeared. It wasn't. The silence between them felt comfortable. The kind built on trust. The kind that doesn't need filling. Titan opened one eye briefly, then returned to resting. Content. Safe. Home. Several weeks later, another surprise arrived. Rachel entered the archive room, carrying a small box. I found something. Caleb immediately laughed. Those words usually lead to trouble. Not this time. The box contained dozens of old photographs. Images from the Northern Star's early years. Passengers, crew members, families, holiday celebrations, harbor departures. History frozen in time. Near the bottom sat one photograph, unlike the others. Captain William Ashford stood beside several crew members. Behind them stretched the very hallway where Titan had discovered the hidden wall. The image captured a moment no one else would have noticed. The captain's hand rested against the exact section where the archive remained hidden. As though he knew. As though he was already protecting it. Rachel studied the photograph carefully. He believed someone would find it. Caleb nodded. And he was right. Later that afternoon, local reporters arrived to document restoration progress. One young journalist approached Caleb near the gangway. What made you decide not to sell everything? The question followed him everywhere now. Caleb glanced toward Titan. The dog sat several feet away greeting visitors. Children especially loved him. The German Shepherd accepted every scratch behind the ears with remarkable patience. Then Caleb answered, "Because some things are worth more than money." The reporter looked confused. Like what? Caleb watched a young boy carefully pet Titan. The child smiled from ear to ear. Purpose. I trialed. The answer appeared in newspapers throughout the region the following week. People quoted it, shared it, discussed it. But Caleb never read the articles. He didn't need to. He was too busy building something. Something real. Something lasting. By early spring, the Northern Star no longer resembled the dying ship he purchased months earlier. Fresh paint covered large sections of the hull. Several public exhibit areas were nearly complete. Archive displays were under construction. Educational programs were being planned. Most importantly, people had stopped calling it the ship nobody wanted. Now they called it the ship that came back. One afternoon, as volunteers worked throughout the vessel, Titan slowly made his way to the observation deck. Caleb followed. The dog stopped near the railing, overlooking the harbor. For several minutes, both remained silent, watching. Fishing boats moved across the water. Children pointed toward the ship from the docks. Visitors arrived for scheduled tours. Life surrounded them. Titan leaned gently against Caleb's leg. The familiar gesture brought a smile. "You did all this." Titan looked up as if questioning the statement. Caleb laughed softly. "Okay. We did." The wind carried the scent of salt water across the deck. Far below, volunteers continued their work, hammering, painting, laughing, living. For years, Caleb had believed isolation was safer, easier. Now he understood something different. People heal people. Community heals people. Purpose heals people. And somehow, through an abandoned ship and a stubborn German shepherd, he had found all three. Yet even as the Northern Star prepared for its new future, one final piece of the captain's legacy remained undiscovered. Hidden somewhere within the archive, waiting patiently, just as the ship itself had once waited. And when that final secret emerged, it would change Caleb's life. One last time. The first anniversary arrived beneath clear summer skies. Astoria, had never looked more beautiful. Sunlight danced across the harbor. Fishing boats drifted through calm water. American flags fluttered along the waterfront. And at the end of Pier 12, where a rusting ghost ship had once been abandoned to decay, a crowd gathered. The Northern Star stood transformed. Fresh white paint gleamed across the hull. Polished brass reflected sunlight. Restored windows sparkled. Flowers lined the gangway. Families, veterans, students, historians, and tourists filled the docks. More than 2,000 people had arrived for the grand opening of the Northern Star Maritime Heritage Center. A year earlier, nobody wanted the ship. Now people traveled across the country to see it. Caleb Mercer stood quietly near the bow. He wore a simple navy blazer. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive. Just clean, respectable. Beside him sat Titan, older, slower. His muzzle carried more gray than before. The injury from the storm had healed, though a faint scar remained beneath his fur. The German shepherd no longer moved with the speed he once possessed, but his eyes remained sharp, wise, proud. Visitors constantly stopped to greet him. Titan accepted each greeting with calm dignity, as if he understood everything, as if he knew this day belonged to him as much as anyone. Emily approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Some habits never changed. "You nervous?" Caleb smiled. "A little." She handed him a cup. "You'll be fine." A year ago, those simple words might not have mattered. Now they meant everything, because Emily had become family. So had many of the people gathered around the ship. The loneliness that once defined Caleb's life had quietly disappeared. Not overnight, not dramatically, simply through time, through trust, through connection, through people who chose to stay. Rachel arrived moments later. A thick folder rested beneath her arm. The same familiar look of exhaustion and determination crossed her face. Even today, she seemed busy. Caleb laughed. "Oh, please tell me that isn't more paperwork." Rachel grinned. "For once, it's something better." The ceremony began shortly after noon. A small stage had been built near the entrance. Community leaders spoke. Historians spoke. Veterans spoke. Students shared stories they had learned through the archive. Many became emotional. The Northern Star had become more than a museum. It had become a symbol, a reminder that forgotten things still matter. Forgotten people, too. Then came Caleb's turn. The crowd applauded as he stepped forward. The sound surprised him. A year ago, most people would have walked past him without a second glance. Now, thousands stood before him, waiting, listening, believing. Caleb looked across the harbor, then toward the ship, then toward Titan. The dog sat near the front row, watching, always watching. Caleb smiled. "I didn't come here looking for treasure." The crowd laughed softly. "I came here looking for a place to sleep." More laughter, then silence. The good kind, the listening kind. He spoke about the ship, about history, about responsibility, about the importance of preserving stories. But most of all, he spoke about second chances, because that was what the Northern Star truly represented. A second chance. For a ship. For a community. For a man who thought his life was over. When he finished, the applause lasted longer than he expected. Much longer. And somewhere in the middle of that applause, Caleb realized something. The captain's prediction had come true. The archive had found its guardian. Not because Caleb was extraordinary, because he cared enough to listen. After the ceremony ended, Rachel approached the microphone. The thick folder remained in her hands. "I have one final announcement." The crowd quieted immediately. Rachel opened the folder carefully. Her expression softened. Several months ago, investigators completed a full review of the remaining archive records. She paused. What we found surprised everyone. Even Caleb looked confused. Rachel removed a document. Old, yellowed, official. The final captain of the Northern Star established a trust. A murmur moved through the crowd. Rachel continued. The trust was designed to support future guardians of the archive. Caleb blinked. What? The crowd laughed softly. His reaction was completely genuine. Rachel smiled. The captain believed protecting history would require sacrifice. He believed whoever eventually discovered the archive deserved security. She looked directly at Caleb. The trust remained dormant for 40 years until now. Silence spread across the harbor. The realization slowly settled over everyone. The captain had planned for this. Not perfectly, not specifically, but intentionally. Even after all these years, he had left one final gift. Rachel stepped forward. The trust has been legally transferred. It provides sufficient financial security for Caleb Mercer for the remainder of his life. The applause began instantly. Thunderous, heartfelt, overwhelming. Caleb stood frozen. For years, he had worried about surviving another month, another week, another day. Now, for the first time since losing Laura, survival was no longer the question. The future was. The crowd continued applauding. Yet, Caleb found himself looking somewhere else. Toward Titan. The old German shepherd remained exactly where he had been, watching quietly. Unimpressed by applause. Uninterested in money. Focused only on his person. The same as always. Later that afternoon, visitors began exploring the museum. Children wandered through exhibits. Families studied photographs. Veterans shared memories. Laughter filled hallways once abandoned to silence. Near the main archive display, a young boy approached Caleb. He couldn't have been older than 10. The boy pointed toward a large photograph hanging on the wall. The image showed Titan sitting proudly beside the hidden wall where everything began. Mister? Caleb crouched. Yeah? Who found the treasure? The question drew smiles from nearby visitors. Caleb looked toward the photograph, then toward the real Titan, lying comfortably beneath a nearby display. The old dog raised his head slightly. Caleb smiled. Him. The boy looked surprised. The dog? The dog. The child walked slowly toward Titan. The German shepherd accepted a gentle pat on the head. Visitors watched quietly. Many already knew the story. Others learned it for the first time. Either way, the reaction was always the same. Respect. End. Chapter say. Of Greater. Tantu. Chapter 6. Den A. Genshe. Because everyone understood loyalty. Everyone understood devotion. And everyone understood that none of this would exist without the dog. A few weeks later, a new exhibit officially opened inside the Northern Star. The final exhibit. The most important exhibit. At its center stood a bronze plaque. Simple, elegant, permanent. Visitors stopped there more than any other display. The inscription read, Titan, loyal partner, protector, discoverer. His courage preserved the truth. His loyalty changed lives. Children often left flowers nearby. Veterans sometimes paused in silence. Dog owners smiled. Many cried. Titan himself occasionally slept beside the plaque, completely unaware that he had become a legend. As summer faded into autumn, the Northern Star continued thriving. Thousands visited each month. The archive educated future generations. Veterans found support through rehabilitation programs established aboard the ship. History remained protected, exactly as Captain Ashford intended. One evening, nearly a year and a half after buying the ship, Caleb stood alone on the observation deck. The harbor glowed beneath sunset. Orange light reflected across calm water. Titan rested beside him, older now, content, at peace. Caleb looked toward the horizon, a horizon that once felt empty. Now it felt full of possibility, full of purpose, full of gratitude. He reached down and rested a hand on Titan's neck. The dog leaned gently against him. The familiar gesture brought back every memory. The homelessness, the storms, the discovery, the fear, the healing, the friendship. Everything. Thank you, partner. Titan closed his eyes. The wind drifted softly across the deck. Far below, visitors laughed as they explored the ship. Life, hope, community. The things Caleb thought he had lost forever. The homeless veteran had found purpose. The forgotten ship had found meaning. And the loyal German shepherd, who refused to leave his side, had become something even greater. A reminder that sometimes the greatest treasures aren't hidden in vaults. They're found in loyalty, in friendship, in second chances, and in the quiet courage of those who refuse to give up on what others have forgotten. The Northern Star sailed nowhere, yet somehow it carried thousands of people forward. And at the heart of that journey rested a simple truth. Legacy isn't measured by what we keep. It's measured by what we protect and what we choose to share. If Titan's loyalty and Caleb's perseverance meant something to you, comment 1 below. Comment 0 if you believe every forgotten thing deserves a second chance. In life, it's not what we own that defines us, but what we protect when no one is watching. And if you enjoy stories about justice, dignity, and people who refuse to quit, subscribe and join us for the next unforgettable journey.